get asked a lot of times, and I think a lot of academics debate, to what extent can leadership be taught? And I'm not actually really sure I know the answer to that. But what I'm going to try to humbly offer today is a little bit of a story of how somebody who was a mechanical engineer in a large state-supported undergraduate institution, who was really fixated on being an engineer primarily, could end up being an academic administrator, and some leadership things I learned along the way. So that's my story, and then maybe we can try to conclude together, what I learned, what I was blessed with, what I was able to pick up from others. I think it's a tricky question. So we're up and running. So you have an idea of where I'm coming from, and just a few things I want to highlight here. So I am a mechanical engineer all the way through. This was part of the reason I was so keen to get the opportunity to talk to this audience today and to be with fellow mechanical engineers as we go through it. My experience after coming through both graduate school and undergraduate was in both industrial and government sectors. I spent quite a bit of time ranging from the first time I ever built a computer model, by the way, on punch cards. Probably most of you in the room don't know what a punch card is. So, but the first structural model I built was on punch cards when I was working at the Forest Research Lab as a student intern. Spent some time at Boeing, but after that, and ended up really starting my career. And I think this is going to be a recurring message through my talk today, is that sometimes you just get lucky. You try to position yourself, you try to get to know smart people who are generous with their time and maybe can help you learn some things. But sometimes you just get lucky. And my good luck was to spend some time at Lawrence Livermore, which is one of the national laboratories in the United States. I knew I wanted to do simulation engineering, right? I wanted to be involved in development of simulation tools. Mechanical engineers, you students in the room will know that you have to be able to use those. You need to be able to apply them. Of course, the technology has moved on a lot since I was doing these things. But I had the fortune of working in the place that had the fastest supercomputers in the world, which was a big deal at that time. And then I decided I wanted to be an academic. And so I spent the majority of my faculty career at Duke University. My first time in the UAE after 20 or so years at Duke and working my way up through the ranks was to become the founding president of Khalifa University, which I had done. I had done administrative roles at Duke. I chaired departments. I'd been a dean. But this was really kind of a head rush, right? By the way, we're going to be founding a university that aspires to be one of the foremost technological universities in the region. And I was fortunate to be picked to lead Khalifa, did that. Spent some time in the State University of New York. This is sort of mind-boggling to me. Sometimes even when you're 20 or 30 years into your career, you discover things that you like and things that you don't like way too late. And it's maybe this is one of the lessons here, is that you should always be open to being surprised and to learning new things. The thing I loved about SUNY was that SUNY's agenda was to provide access to higher education to as many students as possible. And I learned some really innovative ways to do that. And I'll be forever grateful for that. The not so good thing, which wasn't SUNY's fault, was I was the provost of the system. Okay. The SUNY system has 64 campuses and about 500,000 students at the time that I was there. But I wasn't on a college campus. And it was the first time in my career, other than the short period of time I spent at the National Lab, that I wasn't on a college campus. And I really missed it. And so, like I said, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And after some time at SUNY and some time leading one of its campuses, I had the great good fortune to meet Sheikh Badur, the president of AUS, and investigate the opportunity here and eventually be selected to lead this campus. So that's me. I really wanted to put equations on here. but it's been a while for me. So I thought, no, I should be able to actually explain what I did and what I still like to do in my free time without using equations. So here it is. I work in a field called computational mechanics. And so computational mechanics, for those of you student engineers who are used to, you've got your professors asking you to put together finite element models to do analyses in support of designs. Computational mechanics is sort of what's under the hood in those finite element tools. We develop the algorithms that, make those sort of simulations work. But in my instance, my specialty was contact mechanics. So you think about things like tires rolling down roadways, or you think of impact damage to things like knees and ankles and so forth that happen during human gait. In addition to the fact that the solids and the structures that may be involved deform, and they deform quite a lot, which I've shown in my cartoons here. They also contact each other, and there may be friction between them. And so my contributions had to do with the algorithms. So here's a plug I would want to make for learning something about entrepreneurship while you're a student. I am the guy who, my group and I developed the algorithms in almost every commercial finite element code that you all use that deals with contact and friction. Was I smart enough to protect that IP? Not so much, right? So like I said, sometimes you learn things along the way, but tremendously validating career. And I think the thing that I kind of want to point out about it too is I told you I was a mechanical engineer. Actually, at Duke, I had appointments in civil engineering and in biomedical engineering as well. And to do this field, and I think you all know, your technical stuff well enough to realize that to write these kind of algorithms and develop them, you need to not just know engineering. You need to know computer science because you have to be able to implement this stuff. You have to be able to solve the equations. You need some applied math. You need optimization, all kinds of things. And that was what I liked about it. And when I sort of turned to my academic career, I realized that that was something that was really important to me, and that any institution that I worked in or had the opportunity to lead eventually was really something that I wanted to be a part of. So influences. I think influences are very important on leadership. My father was a fairly renowned civil engineer, and many of us who learned structural mechanics learned it out of his books. I took a snapshot of one here. My mother was an English teacher. So as I sort of worked my way through my career and started thinking about what I wanted to do, I didn't have to figure out what education was about. I kind of grew up with it, and I really give credit to my parents for that. And just to kind of back up a step, I never, ever would have predicted that I'd end up in administration. Never. I mean, I was all about the work. I was all about working with students. I was all about the research I was doing. So maybe the lesson in there somehow is be open to being surprised. Sometimes opportunities present themselves that you don't really anticipate, and to be ready for those is good. The other thing I wanted to mention in this connection too is I just had amazing mentors along the way, and some of them might not be especially intuitive. So I finished my PhD at Stanford. My first faculty job was at Duke. The department chair who hired me was a guy named Henry Petrosky. Does anybody know who Henry Petrosky is? Okay, so you should definitely check these books out. So Henry Petrosky made actually a BBC series in the 80s that talked about how the engineering process worked. And that ended up being based on To Engineer is Human. So he was dually appointed at Duke. He was a civil engineer. He worked on fracture mechanics, for those of you who've done some fracture mechanics in your work. But he also had an appointment in history. And he became one of our most influential authors worldwide in sort of describing how engineering was done and how we learn from our failures and how it impacts society. So Henry was a very important mentor for me. The other one I wanted to mention here was a guy named Earl Dowell, who was my dean when I hired on. So like I said, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Earl Dowell is, without question, the foremost aeroelastician in the world, or at least was in his prime. So if you've heard of Theodore von Karman was one of the fathers of aerodynamics. He was the guy who figured out the Tacoma Narrows Bridge disaster and things like that. So Earl Dowell was really one of his successors in that field. So I had this amazing opportunity to learn from people like this who'd done interesting things in the technical world and interesting things that had breadth beyond engineering. And then you kind of become interested in, well, how do you create an environment like this? How do faculty and administrations collaborate together to sort of create places where students can flourish in this sort of environment? So kind of in an unintentional way is how I ended up being an academic administrator. So what have I learned? And that's really where I wanted to conclude what I had to say today. Not in any kind of ranked order. I think I've already sort of mentioned a couple of those. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Sometimes it's good to be open to unanticipated surprises. Those are both, I think, kind of themes. Why do I stay in education? And this was sort of the problem with my SUNY job from a certain point of view. I really do think that students keep not just me, but I think us who are faculty types, they keep us, you keep us young, even if it's an illusion, right? You keep us young. You make us hopeful for what you will be able to accomplish. It gives us our hope for the future. And I've really found this to be true. In terms of advice, without being presumptuous, a credo of mine that you actually see violated a lot. And I don't think it works. Many of us are tending sometimes to want to focus on the next thing. How what we're doing now is going to prepare us for the promotion we want to get or the thing that we want to do in the future. I don't believe it's actually a successful strategy. I think in terms of your energy, in terms of your sort of emotional investment in something, it's always best to focus on the work that you're doing now, do it the best you can, and trust that things will turn out for you well if you maintain that focus. Third is just sort of an observation. I really think if your life's work is about serving others, you'll always have purpose. You never have to worry about feeling aimless or what contribution am I making? If that's your focus, things have a way of turning out. One leadership principle I know for sure is important is honesty, transparency, and credibility are core to any leader's success. So, I look at what I do as an academic leader, and I'm not unbiased on this question, and the faculty in the room can weigh in their own minds of what they're thinking. But I really think that people who have not been involved in the academic enterprise have no business leading it. I think people who know what it's like to teach a room of students, know what it's like to get a paper published, know what it's like to put together teams of students to do fantastic things. Those are the folks who should lead universities. I think you really need to lead by example. And that doesn't mean being insular, but I think that experience is really important. I think we always have to keep our focus as leaders on building environments that nurture and challenge everybody, not make people feel scared. To have a results-oriented culture is fine, right? But people need to be comfortable in their own skins. They need to feel empowered to be able to do things. And I think it's really important. Diversity. This is one of the things I love about working in the UAE, by the way, is I really do think, and I feel like I've felt it both in the academic sector and in industrial sectors, that groups produce better results when they have a diversity of talent, they have a diversity of gender, they have a diversity of backgrounds. Better ideas they get combined in completely unanticipated ways. 7 is kind of a fun one. Don't be afraid to laugh, especially about yourself. Taking oneself too seriously is never a good idea. And I just think that that's sort of an important characteristic we can all try to keep. And then finally, I think being open to new learning and growth all the time is really important. And this is true whether you're a student engineer or whether you're somebody like me who's maybe seen most of their career already. I feel like I learn things every day. And this sort of loops back, I guess, to my comment about students at the beginning. I think that you students maybe don't always realize how much we on the faculty learn from you. And I think that's an important characteristic to keep. So that's what I had. Thank you very much.